Hello everyone, it's your favorite West Virginia on Space here, and if you keep up with Hunt of the Parenting like you should, you'll know Chapter 5, aka Don't Take Me for a Ghoul, has just came out, and let me just say, it was absolutely great. It was everything I could have wanted from the episode and more, and I won't be really doing a review of the episode, more like covering some theories and interesting speculation that I have stemming from it. Also, going forward, we will completely assume that you have seen it, because A, you should, and B, I can't really do this without basically spoiling the ending, so go watch it and then come back here. Then we'll discuss some interesting implications about the human status of our Arcana friends. Now, this is a bit of a subtle detail to those that know World of Darkness lore a little bit more, is that, as you could see from the episode, we get a look at Delirium in the specific for Hunt of the Parenting's world, specifically how it affects people, or at least an interesting visual indicator of it. Now, for those not in the know, Delirium is a bit of a genetic memory that humans have in the World of Darkness, basically due to a mass genocide that the werewolves tried to commit on the humans. All humans have a genetic memory that makes them basically freak out and flip out whenever they see werewolves. This is native to pretty much all humans, so it's not really like there's only like some people, it's just a worldwide thing. And what's interesting is that in Hunt of the Parenting, we get an interesting signifier of it, specifically that when a character is under the effects of delirium, their eyes kind of like wobble and shake and do stuff like that. No matter how controlled they are in the situation, this seems to be pretty universal, as well as just general fear responses. Now, it is worth mentioning that both in Hunt of the Parenting and in the actual World of Darkness lore, how delirium affects someone is not consistent, or more specifically, it can be resisted. But no human is naturally immune to it. All humans are affected by it, it just depends on how strong your willpower is to basically not be controlled by it. Weaker-willed people will just collapse outright. Most will run away in fear or sit still in panic, while the more coherent can still make some plans on the way out or even attack the creature if they are particularly strong in will. But no one is just going to just shake it off completely. Even if, depending on some version of the rules, you're at the absolute highest tier of willpower, where you can basically do any action without consequence, you're still feeling the fear of the werewolf. Effectively, you are still under delirium. You're just taking it better than most can. But no human is naturally immune to delirium, but that doesn't line up with other supernatural stats. You see, one of the most common traits of a supernatural, even a lesser one like a sorcerer or a ghoul in World of Darkness, is the immunity to delirium. Basically, it's not just you just resist delirium, you're just straight immune to it. It just doesn't affect you anymore. This is a key detail, as we can even see it happening in the episode itself, as Occam Conwell, I was saying his name wrong, is clearly just completely immune to it, which makes sense, as he is a sorcerer. Sorcerers are not affected by delirium. However, if we apply this logic to other characters in the episode, we get something kind of interesting, mainly that characters that should be affected by delirium clearly aren't, which has some interesting implications. Specifically that there might not have been just a werewolf in the situation, as the Arcana may be compromised with more than just one. Let's get into it. This part of the video will break down all the characters present in the episode to kind of give us an idea of who is and who isn't human using delirium, specifically under the assumption that, unless otherwise explained in some fashion, a character who isn't affected by delirium is not human, as, once again, all humans are affected by delirium, but supernatural creatures are not. We'll break them into three categories. One is people we know are human because we see them affected by delirium, or have some other excuse that makes sense. The second category is people who are up in the air, people who for some reason show suspicious signs, but we're not entirely certain. And the third category is, well, people who are just straight up unaffected by delirium in such a manner that means there's something definitely squirrely going on with them. Starting with the definitely human category, we're putting Occam Conwell here. Now, once again, he is technically a sorcerer, so he is still human for all intents and purposes, but we know he is human, and though he is immune to delirium, that makes perfect sense given what we know about him. He is a solo sorcerer, he is immune to that kind of thing, so that adds up perfectly fine. Reginald Black-Laurel is next, which we see him very visibly affected by Delirium, even though he holds himself together incredibly well. But he also gives us the baseline of what people should be acting like, even if they're standing tall and brave. Next is Git and Spit, who various times we see them react to Delirium, and they represent the more panicky flea variety, which makes sense. So with those three, we get a baseline. We see what a human who is immune to it looks like, and we get to see what a person who holds himself together looks like, and people who don't hold themselves together. Now, we move on to characters who we definitely know were immune to Delirium. First up is actually Brock Blacklaw, because he literally fist fights the werewolf, and has, no problems. He is just immune to Delirium. There's no way around it. Literally, there's more evidence to believe Big D was affected by Delirium than Block over here was. So there's something squirrely going on with him. I'm not sure what, but he definitely was immune to that. Next up is Matilda Wilde, who pretty obviously was immune to Delirium. She was the one freaking causing it. Because, werewolf. Big D is next. I've heard people say he was affected by it, but we literally see his eyes right next to Reginald, and he is completely fine. He's not shaking, he's not panicking, or even suppressing it. He's fine. He's obviously unaffected. And once again, we see at the ending with his eyes glowing that kind of imply he isn't normal either, so this all adds up. Next is Marcus. He literally gets as close to the werewolf as Brock does, and he is unaffected. But this makes sense. He's basically a sorcerer or a mage. Maybe both, maybe neither. His stats is kind of confusing at this point, but the broad point is that it makes sense he isn't affected by Delirium. The last one we know isn't is, weirdly enough, Kitten. Now, some people are going to find this weird, but I think it makes sense. He is clearly looking at the werewolf several points, reacts to it clearly, and his eyes stay perfectly normal. This would imply he is immune to Delirium, and in case you're curious, no, your loved ones being under threat does not somehow mean you can power through Delirium. It's not like Power of Love can do that for you. Also, but given the fact we've seen Kitten, as detailed in my previous Hunter the Theory video, display feline traits, for lack of a better term, even beyond gags, he literally does stuff that he should not be capable of, it kinda makes sense he would be immune to it. Where things get interesting, however, is our last members. People who may have been affected by Delirium, but may not have, and show very odd traits of it. Let's start up with two people who immediately immediately can probably be excused, is Dr. Gloria Waters and Amanda, as though we don't get a good look at them, we also can't be sure they weren't being affected by Delirium, as they were distant enough that we can't see them very well, and it's also possible they were far enough away that Delirium didn't quite affect them. And they've also dealt with supernatural stuff a lot, so that might have helped them a little bit, but it's just hard to tell exactly. So, why they could have been affected by Delirium here, and they should have, but didn't, there's just enough ambiguity that I don't really feel like speculating too hard on them. Things get interesting, however, with Harry Jacket, Grimmaline, and Elsa Coupler. Mainly that they are right next to the werewolf, and they don't seem to have the same type of reaction. Now, to be fair, one of the people there with them had a similar-ish reaction, but he was clearly under Delirium, and was also visibly a lot more panicked than the other three. This is, it's kind of up in the air, because usually the indicator we can use is the eye thing, but none of them have the eye thing here, but we also know one of them was affected by Delirium. Like I said, it's up in the air, but it is somewhat interesting, I find. Now, there's one person here I want to focus on specifically, mainly the one person who actually fought the werewolf of the three, that being Grimmaline. Grimmaline already was kind of on some suspicious territory by me and many other fans, but this episode just kind of doubled down on that somewhat. Mainly is that not only is she able to fight the werewolf, and granted doesn't do well, but doesn't seem to be affected by Delirium, and she takes some pretty powerful hits in the episode. Now, I will say her last shot seemingly almost has her eyes maybe doing something like Delirium, but the problem is, at least in my opinion, it looks closer to more like the shocked or horrid eyes that they otherwise have in the show. It doesn't quite look like the Delirium eyes, and she also doesn't have the Delirium eyes when she's also right next to the werewolf in other scenes, so I'm inclined to believe she's immune to it personally. also is that, and this is something a few people have pointed out in the comment section, she was able to scratch the bathroom wall. How do you do that? Like, that's solid stuff, and with your nails? Especially because the episode pointed out that leaving claw marks is obviously a supernatural thing and very suspicious at the best of times. Yeah, something's off here. But once again, we're just not sure, as it could maybe be explained away with a gag or something. But overall, we kind of like have settled things down, so let's ask ourselves, what does all this mean going forward for future parts of the story? Well, going forward with this information, we can immediately assume that Blacklaw, his son, Git, and Spit, whatever role they future have in the story, are not going to be secretly working for the monsters. At least at this point, that seems likely. It's likely they'll fill a very traditional role going forward, which I think works well for their characters. With the exception of Brock, though. He's definitely up in the air. As, once again, we know he just wasn't affected, so something's up with him. But this does place a lot of doubt on the Arcana members. Now, granted, we can kind of excuse some of the Big D family, somewhat, we'll get into that. But the Arcana members seem awfully suspicious. We have 5 members who are on some very shaky grounds of if they were affected or not, when they don't have an excuse. Now, my best guess is that maybe some of them have learned just enough solar sorcery that they've picked it up that they might technically count as sorcerers and not count. Except for Grimmel. That chick literally just clawed a wall. That's not normal. I don't know what that is. Now, as a few people have pointed out, it's likely that there might still be a ghoul in their ranks who just kind of dodged the entire thing. However, I don't actually think that, mainly because they've done multiple tests and several reconnaissance, and they've found no sign of a vampire or ghoul. Nothing quite made sense until they realized it was a werewolf. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. The one could maybe still be a ghoul, but it feels like a stretch. Like, really kind of stretching it there. Now, theoretically, it could also be some mages hiding in the ranks or a werewolf, potentially, which, as we've previously established, would be kind of funny. It could be possible. Though I do think it's kind of hilarious, the idea that another one of the members could secretly be a werewolf, and they were just part of 2 completely unrelated packs, and they was all just some kind of long con. That's just like complete coincidence. Although, if you really want to go meta brain, if there was, whatever pack the first werewolf belonged to, happened to be playing a long game, you could almost set it up like a game of, Mafia, where one of them is like, oh yeah, look, I'm totally not a werewolf, I helped you fight that one, in reality they were still feeding them information. I don't think they're gonna do that in the show, but that'd be hilarious. But there is one last one we gotta focus on. Big D, who, yeah, your eyes going white and then glowing in the last shots, that's not normal. I previously thought he might be a mummy, as detailed in my previous theory video, but I'm less inclined to believe that now. At this point, I think he might be an actually imbued hunter, or potentially a solar exalted, but I'm less certain on that. I think imbued hunter might be the most likely, potentially of the Vision Creed, potentially. But we definitely know he's supernatural in some capacity. Although, I'm not sure why he would bother hiding it for so long. It's still up in the air what his actual end goal is. But, like we said, we do have a good reason to believe he's much, much older than he looks, and a lot of factors don't quite add up correctly on his age. We can see his eyes glow, he's immune to delirium, there's definitely something suspicious going on with him, but I just don't have enough information anymore. I was somewhat thinking the mummy one could have been right before, but looking at this new evidence, I just don't know. I'm not familiar with any World of Darkness creature that specifically has glowing eyes, of all things. If anyone here happens to know that specifically, that would be useful. Although I don't think Big D's a vampire, for some people suggest that. I just do not think that's the case. He has several attitude things that just do not line up with that. But overall, that was just my thoughts on the video and some things going forward. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of the episode? And overall, just how do you think the story is going to play out going forward? Because I'm really excited, but I'm not sure where it's going to go. But I can't wait to see. Overall, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you all next time.
Yeah. Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're going to become a subscriber. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.